with tonight being the first night of Rosh Chodesh Adar, and obviously Adar Sheni, the Purim feeling is in the air. There is already, I'm sure, many a high school kid, as we speak, planning what kind of shtick they're going to pull tomorrow or Friday morning. It brings you back to the good old days. Certainly it's important for us to really sort of understand Simcha, because I think Purim, unfortunately, is really one of the more misunderstood Yom Tovim. It has an incredible amount of potential. It's inherently unbelievably holy. In fact, I believe it's the Shloah HaKadosh who said that Yom Kippurim, the day of Yom Kippur, is called Yom Kippurim because it's a Yom Kippurim. Today that is like Purim. And when you say something is like something else, what you're really saying is that the something else is really the main thing, and Yom Kippur is like Purim. Yom Kippur has a similar level of potential, but certainly the implication of that statement, if the Torah calls it Yom Kippurim, and obviously it's only a hint because during the time when the Torah wrote Yom Kippurim, there was no Purim yet. So, but obviously the Torah knows everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything's in the Torah, and really the message is that greater than Yom Kippur is Purim, and that Yom Kippur has its special standing by being similar to Purim, which tells us that Purim has this incredible quality about it. That when you talk about spiritual greatness, that's why they say that some of the greatest people of our history were able to reach their greatest heights spiritually on Purim, which seems to sort of fly in the face of what we sort of look around and see. Because I think, I hate to say it, but I think if a lot of people think of Purim, they sort of think of the day in Judaism that's probably the closest thing to a combination of Halloween, and I don't know, some kind of New Year's Eve type of party kind of thing where it's celebratory, it's involving a lot of alcohol and drinking and partying and frivolity. And while it might look like it, if it really results in that, then we're totally missing the boat. We've totally missed an incredible opportunity. And so the question is what is it about Purim? What's the nature of Purim that gives it its incredible potential? So there is a fundamental concept in Musar that I think we can find a number of different sources for it, but just maybe even last week's Parsha, I think there's something very beautiful to Rashi, certainly the valatora girls, if they remember the shmuzim that I've said over the years, they certainly remember this Rashi because it's really, it's a Rashi I try not to miss every year. It could happen, of course, but I try to really touch upon this Rashi every year. And it's a Rashi that we just read in Parshas Vayakel. And just looking at it from a little bit different angle, normally I focus on one thing, but I'm just going to touch upon that, but really focus on another dimension of this Rashi, where incredibly the Jewish people were told to please bring your donations to the Mishkan, and everybody stepped up and did an incredible job bringing their kelim to the Mishkan. And by the way, if there are questions along the way, don't hesitate to interrupt and just ask. But they bring all their kelim, and the women brought their mirrors, they brought their jewelry, they brought the beautiful gold and silver and their earrings and everything else they had, including mirrors, including the Maris Hatzovos. And it's very fascinating that Rashi says that when the women brought their mirrors, which they used to change their husbands' moods after backbreaking work in Mitzrayim, these women used their mirrors to be able to put their husbands in the mindset of reproducing and having children and having a continuity of the Jewish people. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu's response was, and this is Moshe Rabbeinu now, this is Moshe Rabbeinu who had on a number of occasions done some things very controversial, very independent, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Yashu Kachacha, to all of these different things that I did. He broke the luchos, very, very controversial act that he did, but he did it, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu supported him. He separated from his wife, Tzipora, also very controversial. Miriam and Aaron didn't buy into it, and they criticized Moshe for separating from his wife, Tzipora, and yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, you did the right thing. He says, Yashar Kochacha, you did it right. You need to be with me. You're in a unique status spiritually, and therefore the action was right. Yet here, even though he did a lot of things on his own with tremendous level of clarity of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu really wants. Here, fascinatingly enough, Rashi tells us when Moshe Rabbeinu told the women, no, this is a repulsive thing. To bring mirrors that you use, that you would use with your husband in the bedroom, that's what you bring into the Kodshim, that's what you bring into the Mishkan. Is this really what belongs here? And the word that Rashi uses, who was most ben, he was repulsed by them. It's a very strong terminology. And I guess it's logical. I guess a lot of us would have similar reactions because, there are things, things that you have to be done. They're relegated to the bedroom. They stay in the bedroom. But what you bring into shul is not the same thing you bring into your house. So, and the things have to be separated. We have to have a proper perspective of priorities and separations. So his reaction was fairly logical, but what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him is truly amazing. And he says, Moshe Rabbeinu, don't you're making a mistake, because these are the most beloved to me. These Maras HaTzovos are the most beloved thing you can donate to the Mishkan. So when I spoke about it, with the shmooze and with the kids, I really spoke about look at the intimacy, look at the quality and the beauty of relationship between a husband and wife. For HaKadosh Baruch Hu says these are the most beloved to me. But and you see how unfortunately the world, again, when they look at relationships, they look at it from a physical point of view. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, that not only is it not physical, but look how spiritual it is. Look how beautiful it is. And with this, when you build a Jewish family, that intimacy is something that I hold to be very, very dear. And that's a beautiful thought in its own right in terms of the difference between the way we look at Kedusha and Nisuin, marriage versus the rest of the world. But particularly, from the point of view of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, Moshe, these are the most beloved to me. These are more chav to me than anything else. So what does that mean exactly? Why? Why would this be the most chav? You want to say it's chaviv, you want to say it's okay, you want to say Moshe Rabbeinu, accept them, because after all, this was a mitzvah was done with these mirrors, and a beautiful Jewish marriage is a beautiful thing. It's uplifting. It's all wonderful. But what do you mean the most chaviv? What does that mean that that these mirrors are the most chaviv of all? I mean, why is it different than any other wonderful thing that the Jewish people do, and different mitzvahs which they use, with their possessions and their jewelry or anything else that they use to perform a mitzvah. So I think this concept rings true in a number of different places. I think it's here as well. I think it could be applied to here as well, and it certainly, I think, fits into the essence of Purim, because we find that the ultimate level of Kedusha. What is the ultimate level of Kedusha? Notice that we are a religion that really the only religion, we won't get into that right now, but the whole idea of comparative religions and putting Judaism in sort of the same kind of boat or basket as other religions is really completely inappropriate. But let's just sort of use that vernacular just for the lack of a better terminology, that what makes us very different than, let's say, Christianity is the fact that just on a basic level, Christianity believes that the way you become closer to God is by separating from the physical world and sort of desisting from the physical world. And that's why you have these priests, right? They never get married, and they're celibate, et cetera, et cetera. We know, of course, it doesn't work. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not make man that way. Moshe Rabbeinu was the only person in human history who actually did that and was commended for it, and it was considered a positive and virtuous act due to his literally one of a kind relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For everybody else, it's disastrous. And we see what happens. I mean, we see the scandals in the headlines, what goes on in these places. If you don't follow the Torah's methodology for how you live in the world, it's not going to work. So the idea of desisting completely from physical things is not acceptable. At the same time, we also know that the physical world could, represents the Yetzer Hara. The physical represents temptation, represents, all types of sort of that test of which way we're going to go. Are we going to go after our Yetzer Hara and the physical world, or are we going to go after spirituality and the spiritual world? So while we don't completely desist, we at the same time recognize that if we overindulge in physicality, that's not a good thing. If anything, that we're constantly told that that's something that we have to stay away from. So a Jew's job is to really find that perfect balance. A Jew's job, and when you do it really exactly right, it really is the ultimate level of ruchnius. Yom Kippur represents a day that we separate from physicality. We have the Chamesh Shinuyim. We don't eat, we don't drink, no marital relations, no leather, shoes, nothing along those lines, and no bathing. And it's a day that we attain spirituality through removing ourselves from the physical world. And that's, listen, for one day a year, that's great. We need to do it because, after all, it's a day of tshuva. It's a day of return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's the way, maybe the easiest way for a person to become holy, even on a temporary basis, by separating from all of these physical things. That's our natural connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when we move into a very spiritual realm. But what's even greater than that? What's even greater than that is what a Jew's job is really throughout the year. And on Purim, I guess we have a sort of special, unique opportunity to do it in its ultimate form. The ultimate is really to take this physical world and to elevate it. To turn everything that we have in this world into Kedusha by using it for the purposes of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu and elevating ourselves. That's why the Muslims from talk about, you can take a bag of potato chips. I mean, right? You can just dive into that bag because it's so tempting and it's so delicious. And you who doesn't love potato chips, right? You can't eat just one. So it's an old commercial way before your time about Lay's potato chips. But anyway, but in other words, so you can just dive into it and you can just say, okay, I enjoy potato chips. Okay, listen, you're not a rush if you do that. But if you take those same bag of potato chips and you say, you know what, I'm hungry, I need some energy, or I really enjoy it and it's going to help me concentrate, or whatever it might be, and you just refocus the physicality into a spiritual direction, then it becomes holy, it becomes elevated, right? It could be whatever it is. You can go to Shiloh's and have a steak, and it's the same type of thing. So in life, our job is not to run away from physicality, but our job is to elevate the physicality. It's to elevate the physical world. Chanukah is one level where it's really a very spiritual focused yontif. There is an element of Suda there, but really it's not the main thing. It's spiritual. That's why we say Hallel on Chanukah, because it's appropriate on Chanukah to say Hallel. When it comes to Purim, we don't say Hallel, and many different reasons why we don't say Hallel on Purim. But essentially, it's really not. It's not a day that removes each and every one of us is to remove ourselves from the physical world. Just the opposite. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to celebrate, and that's what the halacha is very clear, with this Suda, with all of the different elements of what goes on Purim. Certainly it's a very physical day in terms of the yayin, and in terms of the Suda. It's an absolute halacha that we must have a Suda. We must celebrate in physical realms. So what makes Purim so amazing? So when you have a yontif that takes the physical and elevates it to its highest form, where, again, everyone who knows me knows I'm the last person in the world as a proponent of drinking. I really feel that drinking is a major problem in the Jewish community on Purim. And I really would say we just all should desist. Maybe there are a few Yechidim who can pull it off, but as a general community, I think we have to move in the other direction. But no one can deny, and I won't deny it either, that if you know how to take that wine or that alcohol in its very proper measured way, and to use it to reach a certain level of clarity through the physical world, and to reach a level of Zvekis b'Kadosh Baruch Hu through the physical world, that's the highest level that a Jew can reach. And that becomes almost angelic, because, and maybe even more so, because the angels are purely spiritual beings. We, on the other hand, are taking the physical world and elevating it, and when you can do that, that becomes the greatest ruchnius, and that becomes the greatest simcha. That becomes the ultimate usage of the physical world. Because we know if you're using the physical world for self-gratification and you just become sort of a taker of the physical world, it leaves you empty. But if you use the physical world and you elevate the physical world and now you're using it for spirituality, then it all comes together. And that's why Yom Kippur really, in a sense, pales in comparison to Purim. And Purim represents the ultimate because Purim requires even a greater level of purity on the part of a Jew. To be able to see this day and to appreciate the Chazi Hashem and to sort of, as the halacha says, we stand firm and we have that Suda. What are we really saying with that Suda? The Shulchan Aruch is very clear. The Mishnah writes very beautifully that when we have that Suda on Purim, we're saying that there are humans in the world throughout all of Jewish history who tried to wipe us out, who tried to destroy us. Look at us. We're having a Suda. We're having this gorgeous table, and we're celebrating, and we're partying to the proper degree, with the proper feeling, and we use that alcohol to reach that level of ruchnius. Again, I think most people can't do that, and that's why I think it doesn't work. And the Mishnah also is very clear that if the drinking brings you to compromise even one halach in the Shulchan Aruch, you can't drink. If you're going to miss one Asher Yotzar, if you're going to miss a Ma'ariv, if you're not going to be able to bench properly, then you have no right to drink. So, it's very rare to find people who really can balance it. But certainly the great ones in our history were able to do that. And I think they said about Yisrael Salanter, that he would drink, he would reach this incredible peak of Ruchnius. He would sort of take a nap or, sort of go to sleep just almost instantly and wake up and literally he was, back to the way he was beforehand. But using that quality of physicality. So when we sort of look at the world in this way, and that's really, when you think about it, that really is the process of Yom Kippur. Isn't it interesting that we have, the holiest time of the year? Of course, we start with Elul, and we'll use Av to get ready for Elul. We use Elul to get ready for Rosh Hashanah. We have Rosh Hashanah brings us to Aseret Yemei Tshuva. Aseret Yemei Tshuva brings us to this incredible day of Yom Kippur. And what happens just 5 days later? Okay, the 10th is Yom Kippur. The 15th already, we're doing Sukkot. What's Sukkot? Chag Simcha Seinu. It's you just went from being so spiritual, now you're running off with the Simcha and you're celebrating, and the answer is absolutely, yeah, you're exactly, that's what you say. And what is the Chag Simcha? What's it also called? It's called the Chag Osif. It's called the Chag of the ingathering, when we have our crops, when we have our produce. And specifically during that time, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? Even though you're filling up your bank accounts with all of your beautiful crops and produce, what do? We go out of our comfort level, go into the sukkah, and through the Chag of Sukkot, we're able to sort of channel all that spirituality that hopefully we reached till Yom Kippur, and now find a way to take all of the physical world and redirect it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the Chag of Sukkot, by sort of reminding us that's the balance. Yes, we have the produce. Yes, it's the holiday of the ingathering and of the most materialistic time, so to speak, in terms of the produce that we have. Yep, we channel it by moving into the sukkah and redirecting ourselves in that way. So that's really, yeah.
So you were saying how you have to elevate everything physical, spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you elevate your day-to-day things? How do you elevate your homework or your phone? Or I go to a secular college, I go to CSUN. So how would I elevate CSUN?
Well, very simply. Very simply. No, not by levitation. Don't try. Okay. Well, why are you going to college?
To get a degree.
Right. Why do you want a degree? Yes, you do.
Your money.
Okay, but what do you and what do you want money for?
Education and a purpose.
Basically. Okay. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but let me just rephrase it a little bit. Okay. You want to build an incredible life with an amazing person who will be your husband. Okay, maybe, you can use that money. I'm not saying you will, but certainly there are women out there who say, I want to make it possible for my husband to maybe learn a little bit, maybe learn a year or two, maybe more than a year or two. And I want to be able to get that job so that maybe he can take that time. We can have that possibility of maybe having a year or two in Eretz Yisrael for the Shana Rishona. And even if not, but I want to make sure my kids can go to yeshiva. And therefore I want to be that breadwinner as well, so that we can have the kind of menuchas nefesh, so we can live a spiritual life without the the big yoke of worrying about panasa. So it's all about connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a proper way. It's all about the future of allowing yourself. Now you're right. I mean, if you're just dreaming about the Mercedes convertible and you're saving up to that's right. I know that. I wouldn't say it if I didn't know who I was talking to. But so yeah, it's not hard at all. We just have to rechannel. I think some things are truly problematic. In which case, I once had a student, and he thanks me to this day, where he told me, Rebbe, I'm going to Cancun with my friends. He's a single guy, and I said, no, you're not. Because there's just no way you're going to go to Cancun, because there's nothing you can tell me about Cancun is going to help you. Nothing about Cancun is going to elevate you it's only going to, tell me if I'm wrong, tell me, but tell me that you're not going to come back in a much lower spiritual state after your trip to Cancun than before. And he had to admit that and I was very impressed because he actually canceled the trip and he didn't go. And he tells me, he's in his 30s now, and he tells me that trip could very possibly have saved his life, because it could have easily been the door to, a whole new level of regression spiritual, as opposed to, keeping solid where you can constantly keep building. When you go, you put yourself down in a big hole that it's very, very hard to get out of. So there are some things that you can say really don't represent, anything of spirituality. But, again, we're with Pesha, we're getting towards our, I don't know if it's going to happen, but in other words, we don't dream of going to Cancun, but we think about going to Hawaii for a few days on our 40th anniversary, or at least around that time. It's, the school, now will it happen? It won't happen. But again, if a couple decide to go to a beautiful place and connect on that level, and and just sort of use that as a way of just expressing love for one another, then that could be a wonderful thing, and that could be a spiritual thing. Seeing the nature. That's why valatora takes these crazy trips. We do it more with the boys, with the girls, but certainly going to Yosemite and seeing your bond with nature. Everyone has a great time, but you don't really realize when you're going through it. But years later, you realize I made amazing connections during those trips, and I have incredible memories of a spiritual environment around me, such as a school, associated with the best times of my life. If you can do that, that brings tremendous simcha, and that is an elevated concept. So it's not that hard. It really that. The Gemara says, "Bitul zu kuma." When people take off of learning, take vacations. If you're taking a vacation to recharge your batteries and to be able to continue your spiritual growth, for a man, let's say, by taking a vacation before it goes back to yeshiva, or a woman, a wife, a mother doing the same thing, needing the time to recharge your batteries, and all of these types of things. That's spirituality. That is, you are growing from that. Even though right now you closed the Gemara, you walked out of the Beis Medrash, but that's all part of what you need to continue the process of an upward growth. So it's again, it can't work all the time, but you'd be surprised that pretty much everything in life, unless it's prohibited, unless it's truly problematic, could be redirected in a spiritual way. So I think Sukkot really represents the exact same thing, because Sukkot is the ultimate level of Simcha. Purim is the ultimate level of Simcha, and it's in all of these places we're taking physicality and we're redirecting it, and we're moving it into, we're getting perspective of it, and we're moving it into the realm of service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's one thing. That's in terms of sort of the approach that we have to life, which is critical. Very often this whole compartmentalization of things, where there's the spiritual time and the physical time, and the whole that crazy Vegas syndrome, where what happens here stays here, and sort of that mentality is that I become sort of two people. I have my spiritual life, and then I have my other life, and that doesn't work. It'll leave a person empty, and it's just. It's fraught with issues. A person has to be consistent. I heard a beautiful pshat once as to why Yisachar, who is the Shevet of Torah, Yisachar Chamar Gorim. So all the Mefarshim say that Yisachar carries the weight of Jewish leadership on their shoulders, because they were great in Torah, and they would paskin shilos for the Jewish people, etc., etc. So the question is, the pasuk says, Yisachar chamor gorim. Okay, so Yisachar is that chamor who's sort of carrying the burden. Like, why a chamor? I mean, a chamor is not a very nice animal. Everyone goes to see the horses. Now Santa Anita is closed, but right when Santa Anita is open, they go to observe the beautiful horses and stuff, And horses are really incredible animals. Why compare Yisachar to a donkey when you can compare it to a horse? And a horse also carries burdens, and it would be so much more sort of nicer. And I heard a beautiful pshat that there's a fundamental difference between a horse and a donkey. When a horse rests, when it's carrying a load, it needs to stop because you can tell that the horse needs getting a little restless and it needs to rest. When it rests, it takes the load off. Get the load off my back. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want to compare, or Moshe Rabbeinu did not want to compare Yisachar, who has Torah leadership attached to it, to a horse, because that's not a Torah leader. A chamor also needs to rest. But when a chamor rests, it just needs to stop. Just need to take it easy, but you don't have to take the load off. I'm not shirking my responsibilities and throwing the yoke that I'm carrying away from me. I'm able to bear it 24/7. I just need to stop a little bit and take a break. And that's really the way a Jew has to look at life. Even when we do take that break and we sort of indulge in physicality, it can't be. Now it's all physical. I'm throwing away the spiritual, and now I'm just celebrating, and you'll wake me up, and in a week later I'll go back to my spiritual life. That's not the way a Torah perspective works. A Torah perspective is I'm always in that spiritual world, but I take a break. Okay, but the break is to recharge. The break is to be able to continue my work, and therefore it becomes holy as well. Okay, so that's certainly one very important concept that Purim represents, and if we can sort of get into that mode and realize that through taking the physical elements of this world, just like by the Maris Hatzovos, that's why I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu said they're the most chaviv to me, because you've taken the ultimate physicality, right? The sort of the moment that a person is in a sense most indulged in the physical world is during that moment of intimacy between a husband and wife. And the Jewish people took that moment of intimacy and redirected it in a spiritual way, where they had the proper thoughts behind it, they had the proper connection behind what they were doing. It was intimacy, it wasn't just lust, it wasn't just passion, it was something that was deep and connected and part of an incredible relationship between husband and wife, and you had even in a sense even a loftier intention of building the future of the Jewish people and producing Jewish families. So that's the most chaviv. You've elevated, you've taken the most physical element potentially in the world, which is that moment of connection between a man and a woman, and you've elevated it to the moment of love between a husband and wife. And that's the greatest thing. So again, if we recognize what it is that we're doing and realize that, God forbid, to feel sort of dirty or inappropriate, and that's why it's so sad when just to get back on my soapbox for a minute, with the whole socializing world that we're living in, it's if we're not careful, if we don't sort of keep ourselves in the proper direction during those challenging teenage years, we can completely distort the truth about what relationships are. Because certainly in the secular world, it's all about self-indulgence. It's all about gratification, and then we're sort of preparing ourselves for a relationship that's doomed to failure. And that's why I think it's now 70% the divorce rate in the outside world, because this is no way it's going to happen. If you're looking to marriage for self-gratification, it's going to get bored. You're going to get tired. You're going to find somebody that seems to be able to gratify you on a better level, in a more self-indulgent level. So then, of course, you're going to say, you know what, I'm moving on. Now it's time to go. Our marriage lasted 2 years. Whoa, in Hollywood, 2 years is b'chala, it's a super long time. If you're unbelievably, it's 5 years. But if you ask a from Torah-dika couple, who's married 20, 30, 40, 50 years, tell me, which is the most closest you felt? Where has your marriage been at the peak of its connection to one another? Where do you feel the greatest level of love? And I would say 99% of those marriages will tell you right now. at the longest point of our marriage is the point of where we feel most connected. So. Why? Because that's where you've given the most, and you've shared the most, and you've seen the most. You've grown the most together. So that's where you don't get tired if that's the essence of the relationship of giving. So that is one very important dimension. There's another aspect where this whole idea again of simcha is something that seems to be very critical in Jewish life. And again, it's not, again, I don't know if we really stress this enough with our kids. And I know you don't have your own kids yet, but Hashem, you will at the right time soon. And it's so important because the challenge is going to be how do we raise those kids? And I don't think there's enough emphasis. I think the schools are guilty of it as well. There's not enough emphasis of making sure that our kids grow up with simcha. It's a word that we sort of, we pay lip service to, but do we really understand how critical it is? Do we really understand that when we read the Tochacha and these horrific words that come out in Parshas Kisavo, where Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us what's going to happen to the Jewish people if we don't follow the mitzvos, and in graphic and horrific terms, he articulates clearly the nature of 2,000 years of Golus, the pogroms and the Holocaust and the Inquisitions and all the terrible tsaras. I mean, they're all spelled out in graphic terms by Moshe Rabbeinu. And then he says an incredible pasuk. And how did this all happen? How did it get to this point? And the pasuk says, pasuk in Kisavotachas, that it all happened because he didn't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu from a point of view of simcha. When you had the ability, when you had the blessings, and sort of you missed the boat about what serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all about. And so this idea of simcha is not just sort of like a goal that happens or a result of what happens when you really have everything perfectly calibrated and you take the physical world and you elevate it. That brings one to a high level of simcha, and it sort of brings one to the highest level of spirituality. While all that is true, it seems to be even more basic than that. It seems to be that seems to be a critical component of what a Jew is all about and how we have to live our lives on a daily basis. Most Jews will tell you, remember Rabbi Grunblatt, who's now Rashiv in Chavetz Chaim Yeshiva. So I remember he told me a story a while ago. Many years ago, he told me a story about he was in a matzah factory, and Chavetz Chaim would send guys to produce a whole batch of matzahs. They still do. You can still order sort of Chavetz Chaim shmur matzahs if you want. So he was telling me he was at the bakery, and Hasidim were in charge. Most of these matzah bakeries are run by Hasidim. So the yeshiva guys came as well to sort of enhance what was going on. But essentially, it was handled by Hasidim, and he was talking to one of them. And I'm not saying this reflection on all Hasidim, it happened to be just this particular story, but Rabbi Grunblatt asked, how does it work with you guys? This whole idea of, you meet a girl for like 10 minutes and, you just sort of, meet one night and the next day you're ready, or that night even, sometimes you make it to them. What happens? He said, how does that work? And because, what happens if you end up, you find out after you get to know this girl that you're completely not compatible? So, it's a cute story. I don't like it because I don't like the way he answered the question. I think a lot of Jews sort of look at life this way. And he said, so where does it say you have to be happy? So let's say I'm not happy. So I'm married and I have children, so I have to be happy. And, it was, I don't think he meant it seriously. I think he sort of was saying it tongue in cheek. But it's still, just the whole idea of sort of talking like that is extremely damaging. Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal said that we lost an entire generation of Jews because we adopted a certain expression, a Yiddish expression. When the Jews of Europe came over, early 1900s, and subsequently, there was an expression that was very common on the mouth of the Jewish people. And Rav Moshe says we lost a generation because of this expression. The expression is "Shver zu sein a Yid." It's tough to be a Jew. So Jews came over to America, and they had to, it was struggle because of, the jobs and the Shabbos work, and they didn't want to work on Shabbos. They lost their jobs, whatever it might be, and it was challenging. It was tough. But he explained when a kid hears from a parent, Shver zu sein a Yid, it's difficult to be a Jew So now, like, why? Why? Why do I struggle? What's the point? Let me go to a different lifestyle that's not shver. So obviously, on a deeper spiritual, emotional, psychological level, when you see the truth, you recognize the truth, you maybe you feel there are no options, but it's really not enough, especially in today's world. I don't think that's enough. If you try to convince a child, a teenager, even maybe a prospective Baal Tshuva, why should I adopt this? Why should I be a religious Jew? Why should I follow the Torah? If the answer that we're going to give them, which is a true answer, why should you follow Torah? Because God gave it to us, and it's truth, and it's what's going to get us into Gan Eden, and it's going to give us eternity, and otherwise we're going to get punished. All the truths that are fundamental and basic to what we believe. I don't think it's going to get them. I don't think today that's the answer. If that's the way a kid grows up, I think you're playing with fire in not giving them the tools to literally face the onslaught of what's going to be out there in this world. Because it is tough out there to face the world and to be a Torah-dika person today. You need tremendous strength. So if that's the only thing we've got, for some people, for very cerebral people, it might be enough. But I think to the general population, it's not. What we have to show them and what we have to give them is, why do you want to be a Torah Jew? Why do you want to live a Torah life? Why do you want to do all the mitzvahs and the halachas of the Shulchan Aruch? Because there is no other life that will give you the depth of satisfaction and the inner meaning and the inner tranquility and the absolute just daily joy of being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than this life. It's the only life that you'd want to lead because once you live it, you'll never want to leave it. You'll always appreciate that this is the only way to live, and nothing else in the entire world can come close. Now, which is true. I mean, if we don't feel it, we have to work on it. But it is what I said is absolutely true, and we need to inculcate this into the next generation, and obviously into ourselves, because we can't give it over unless we believe it. And that's why parenting. Everyone talks about parenting skills and this and that, and they're all wonderful to go to all these seminars and workshops and and take courses. It's all great, but at the end of the day, it really boils down to the hard work of appreciating what we have and making sure we don't fall into that trap of tachas asher ovartos Hashem Elokecha b'simcha v'tuv levav. The idea of simcha, the idea of what, in a way, maybe we can use Purim as sort of as a catalyst and sort of a model of what we can do the rest of the year. I'm not promoting drinking the rest of the year. I'm saying that, in other words, if we recognize how close we can feel to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by taking the physical world and elevating it and finding that perfect balance of spirituality and physicality, that will help us navigate the rest of the year in the proper way, because we need to give over that sense of joy. When I see kids, and again, I don't think it's focused upon enough. You see kids sometimes, they're 12, 13, 14, 15, and they're very intense, and they're very, very, they want to do well, and they're focused in school, and they're, and especially if, they're masmidim, and they're learning extra, and it looks great, but if that kid's never smiling, if that kid, takes his svarim on Friday afternoon and learns extra before mincha, because he's, even if it's not because he's going to get extra points with his Rebbe and and get extra credit points, but let's say he just does it because he knows it's a great mitzvah. But if it's not, if it's in a sense leading to sort of a morose perspective where you're not really enjoying what you're doing, you're sort of doing it because you feel you have to, but you don't really want to. It's not so simple that a person should be urged to go overboard and to give extra time if that's not where you're at right now. And this is, again, it's a little bit of a controversial, what I'm sharing with you. I don't know, I'm telling you right now, probably there are other people going to disagree. My Rebbe and my Misorah from my yeshiva in Chavetz Chaim, the yeshiva would not push high school kids for extra night star. And he would encourage kids to play ball. He would encourage kids to have a little bit of a downtime and an outlet, as opposed in today's world where the pressure on a lot of these really from families and a lot of these really from yeshivas are pushing total intensity of learning. and I really do feel, and I see it, unfortunately, and again, I'm in my little enclave here in Los Angeles, so I don't see the whole world, but, I do move around a little bit, and I do talk to different people, and you do read a little bit, and the idea that if you're not inculcating these kids with a simcha sachayim and a joy of life and a joy of what it is to be an Eved Hashem, and to bring that joy into their Torah, because Torah is not of course, it's a serious endeavor, but it should never, ever lead to any type of sort of, morose or just sort of, just non-passionate type of involvement. It's a very interesting thing. We say the bracha, right? V'haravna Hashem Elokeinu as Devar. Every day we make the bracha V'haravna, make Torah sweet. We have to have a special, unique relationship with Torah and with Avodas Hashem and with being a Jew, and that has to be, it's rooted in a relationship that's positive, and it's focused on serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a sense of appreciation of what it's about. And that's why very often you see these kids who are very intense, and they're amazing in high school, and you look at them when they're 22 and 23 and 24, sometimes even later, and they're out. They're not where they were, and they're in a much worse place. And they will tell you this level of burnout that happens if you're not progressing naturally. If your Avodas Hashem is not becoming part of you in a very comfortable kind of way where it meshes with who you are as a Jew, and it makes sense to you, because again, I'm not talking about breaking halacha, but even, very often we grab more. If we're not grabbing more in a pace that's consistent with who we are, then it sort of twists us in a negative way, and it's not healthy. Our job is Ivdus Hashem b'simcha. Simcha is an incredible component of our Avodas Hashem, and needs to be very much a focus of how we lead our lives. And that's why when a kid grows up in a home, he needs to see that joy. He needs to see that the parents, it's a shalom bayis, it's that feeling of connection, it's that feeling that, I'm so happy here. I'm so comfortable because of the fact that, my world is a world where the people around me, the people I love the most, are serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with simcha. So we can be great parents, but if we're not working on this element in our own lives of simcha, of recognizing how fortunate we are to have the truth and to be able to live a Torah life and to be able to do the mitzvahs every single day that we're alive, that to appreciate that opportunity. If we're not doing that, then we are missing a critical element in our own lives, and God forbid it can affect the way it's transmitted to the next generation. Maybe one last point regarding simcha, and then I think Rabbi Klein is supposed to, I guess, or somebody else supposed to come and take over. I think you guys normally go to 9:45 or whatever. Okay, hopefully that'll happen. But one other point, which is really an incredible point of simcha, when we do mitzvos and when we are close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is the greatest form of simcha. So, in other words, doing mitzvos, it results in simcha in a very natural kind of way. You don't have to fake simcha. Okay, although maybe that, going through the motions might help. We know that mitoch sholishma bolishma, but the Rambam says a beautiful thing. It's a famous Rambam. But just to hear the words of the Rambam and just to sort of see the element of what simcha is about and how we can ultimately really reach it in our own lives. So he says like this, very end of the laws of Megillah, the Rambam says, "Mutav laharbos b'matanos avyonim, milaharbos b'sudaso v'shachmanos l'reyav." If you have extra money and you were able to add something more and enhance any of the mitzvos, so you basically, Megillah is Megillah. So you read the Megillah, you don't really, you can't really enhance that. I guess maybe you can buy a fancier Megillah, but let's assume that your Megillah is your Megillah. You have three other choices. You have Matanos of Yonim, you have Mishach Manos, and you have the Suda. So you can enhance any one of those three things. So which one should you enhance? So says the Rambam, you should enhance Matanos of Yonim. You should give extra money to Aniyim. So why? I'm not here again to criticize, but sometimes you see people spending who knows how much money on a Mishloach Manos basket to a guy who's already a millionaire, like what exactly is that about? So maybe you just want a job or something. I don't know. But you're buying this beautiful shlach manos and you're sending it out. Is that really the way to go? The Rambam says it's not the way to go. Take that extra money, send a decent shlach manos, but take that extra money, give it to a poor person. Why? So his reasoning is incredible. She'ein sham simcha gedola mufara. There is no greater simcha in the world. Nothing more beautiful, nothing more enhancing. Ella l'sameach leiv aniyim v'yisaymim v'almanos v'gerim. If you can pick up the downtrodden and you can bring joy to the heart of a poor person, a yasam, an orphan, a widow, a convert, these are people very often in a difficult spot, in a difficult situation, and they need that support, and you give them that support, and you lift up their spirits. There's nothing gives you more satisfaction than that. And here's the key line. A lot of people quote this part of the Rambam. They don't always finish the Rambam. And to finish the words, this is really such a key element, and really I think touches upon all of what we spoke about before, is at the end of the day, when you support and you lift up and you give joy to these people, you become godly. Okay, you emulate God, and as I heard from a wise fellow who probably knows a little bit about Kabbalah, probably more than I do, that's for sure. He says, in the physical world, closeness is measured by proximity. Okay, right? If I'm close to something, I will become physically connected to it as close as possible. In the spiritual world, closeness, you can't get close physically in the spiritual world. Right? So how do you get close? It's by being similar. The more similar you are, is the closer you are in the spiritual world, unlike the physical world. So when you become close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, okay, who's the source of everything that's good in this world, then you are bringing about godliness. You're bringing godliness into your soul, into your essence. And what does the Shechina really represent? From the Haftorah of Rosh Hashanah, that the message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us is, and that's what He does, is to lift up the spirits of the low, of the downtrodden, and those who are low spirited. So basically, you see how critically important Simcha is, and Purim is a time of Simcha. Our entire Avodas Hashem has to be rooted in Simcha, and the way to do it is to become godly. And the most godly thing we can do is take care of poor people, take care of people who need our help. So if we can work on B'noma Chavero, that's really where, obviously Musar comes into a great degree, because that's so much of what Musar focuses in on, that the need to be sensitive to other people. Rabbi Yisrael Slanter, looked around in Europe at the time that he was living, and he said something is wrong. These people are very great Talmidei Chachamim. They know Shas, but something's lacking in their interpersonal relationships. We got to get back to this fundamental principle. So Be'ez Hashem, I think Purim, which is also a tremendous focus of B'noma Chavero, the whole idea of the Kish Echad B'leiv Echad was sort of reinforced again on Purim with the Achdus of Purim and the Mishlach Monos and the Matanos of Yonim, and all of that, what it represents. We can Be'ez Hashem take this incredible Bishnichus Adamar Mesimcha, have it lead towards a Purim that really allows us to fulfill Purim for exactly what it was designed for, which is the ultimate level of Simcha, the closest to Kodesh Baruch Hu, and hopefully that'll catapult us to of course, Nisan throughout the rest of the year, and Be'ez Hashem will have Yishnat Gula V'Yeshua. Okay, thanks so much.